All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this next lesson in our series where we're building a real-world Java web application from scratch, leveraging the power of mostly the Spring technologies as well as Hibernate and so on and so forth. But anyway, if you haven't watched any of the series, you're way too far ahead. You need to go way back to video one because we've done a whole bunch of stuff. So in this video, we are going to essentially test out the code that we had written and put in place to be able to log in to our sort of protected spaces inside of our own web application that we're building. So how to accomplish that is, we have a few steps here. The first step is now that we have our, user detail service implementation completed, we need to have a user that we can actually use in the database to be able to log in as. Because right now this is going to be reading from the database and trying to log in with users from the database. But right now we have no users in the database. So let's start that process. So if I go to my database, we go to the users table. Let me open up a new query tab. If I do select star from users, we'll see that there are no users in here. So let's insert into the database. Now, normally we would do this via the front end. You'd be able to register as a new user and so on and so forth. But that's going to take a whole bunch of additional steps for us to get there before we can actually see it in action in terms of the logging in code that we just wrote. So what I'm going to do is manually insert into the database for now, test that the logging in works, then we can create some functionality to register as a new user at a later point. So let's insert into the users table. We'll insert a name, a password, and a username into the database. So the name will be, Trevor Page or whatever your name is. The password will be to be determined because there's a curveball there. And the username will be whatever we like. So I don't know, Trevor at craftycoder.com, for instance. So the reason why I left the password blank is because it needs to be encoded. Okay, you should never store unencoded, in other words, just plain text passwords in your databases. Okay, that's never a good idea. So if your password's like, password 123 or something, if someone were to get access to, you know what? Let me insert this. Let me put this in the database. There. So now when I say select star from users, there is a row. It automatically generated an ID of 1, name, password, username. So if someone were to get access to my database and download the users table, the password here is human readable, password 123. So that is a terrible security issue and concern. Not necessarily because the hacker can now log in as you into the FreshVotes app, because that's not really too big a deal, right? The FreshVotes app is just a fun little app. The bigger deal is if you use this same password for other websites, right? So if you use this same username and password for Facebook or Instagram or your online banking or what have you, that's where the real security concern comes from. So you should never have unencrypted passwords in your database. So how can we encrypt this? Well, it's actually, it's not too difficult. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a test file class here. So in our tests directory, which was automatically generated when we created our Spring Boot application, I'm going to create a new class, but I'm going to create it. I'm trying to think what the best test case would be here in terms of the file and good structure and whatnot. I guess we're essentially doing a user detail service type test. So here's what I would do. I would right click on the user detail service. I would say new, and I would say JUnit test case. Okay. And the reason why I'm going to do this is just because it's going to automatically, do some stuff for me that makes my life easier when I do it this way. Instead of manually creating the class from scratch, you could do that too, but I'll show you what it does. So I'll say JUnit test case, and I'll call this, user detail service. I'll get rid of the impl. I'll just call it user detail service test. As you can see, the source folder is the test folder that it's using, which is great. And I'll just say finish. So now it's going to insert, it's going to create a package. So that's what it did. It created a new package, com FreshVotes service, inside of the source test Java folder. It has created user detail service test here. It has annotated a method with the @test annotation, and it has done some static imports. One static import and one other import for the @test here. And this, I'll show you what this is for in a moment. So Cool. It's just, it's easier. It saves you from having to type all this out, is what all this does, right? When I right-clicked on this class, said new JUnit test case, okay? And you could do the same thing for anything else. You could right-click on it and say new JUnit test case, and it would create, it would create a new package. It would blah, 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 blah. So it would do everything for you automatically. In any case, let's go in and let's get rid of this fail line, because if I were to right-click on this test and say run as a JUnit test here, it'll just say failed, right? It'll say failed, and with an error will be, let me bring this down here. It'll say not yet implemented, right? Which is the failure that we have here. So basically what I'm doing here, the reason why I'm writing a test case is because I want to encrypt, I want to find out what the encrypted value of my password should be. And I just typically write a test for that, because typically this is a process that sometimes happens over and over, where you need to generate an encrypted password. So this is just a test that I write. So, generate encrypted password will be the name of this method, this test case that I'm writing. So it's not going to be a true test case in that it's testing the validity of the encryption process. But anyway, this is just where I put it. It's sort of like a helper method to help generate this encrypted password. So how the heck do I do this? Well, the first thing is we need to leverage the same encryption algorithm that we did before, which was called the bcrypt password encoder. So I'm going to create a new bcrypt password encoder over here, like so, and we'll call it, encoder or something. Okay, so that's going to create an encoder, and then I just say encoder dot, I think it's just encode, encode, and then it wants a raw password meaning plain text, right? So kind of like this, password 123, like we had before, right? And then we can assign that to a string, so we'll call this the encoded password. And I guess the true test case that we can write here is to assert that the password that we generated is not equal to the encoded password. I guess that's a very simple, plain, easy test case that we can write. So I'm going to extract, first thing I'm going to do is extract this into an actual variable. So I'm going to do Alt-Shift-L? Yeah, extract local variable. So I'll call this raw password. Okay, so now raw password equals password123, and then we're injecting that into, or we're passing that into the encode method. Okay, so with these two values here, with these two variables here, what we want to do is make sure that the two of them are not equal to each other. And what we could do is we can do an assert that. Okay, I'll do shift space or control space, and that brings up all these different assert that's. And I think the one that we want, I accidentally got rid of the static import that we'd had. Good Lord, there's a lot of them. Let's just see if it figures that out on its own. So we'll say assert that raw password is not the encoded password, essentially, right? That's what we want to do. And the not should be, here we go, static import. I think it's core matchers is where it comes from. And assert that we can do static import from assert, I believe is where they come from. Okay, I think I did that correctly. So here's the static imports that we're doing. And the word static is, or doing a static import is helpful to lessen the amount of typing that you're doing down here. If we just did an import without doing static, what we would need to do is, can we even do that? The import cannot be resolved. So assert dot star, is that what we have to do here? And dot not, or dot star again. And then what we have to do here is the not, we would have to say core matchers dot not, I believe. And then we would need to import core matchers. And then assert that, again, would need to be assert dot assert that. And then we would need to import the assert from, I think it comes from, is it JUnit? Yeah. So that is what we would need to do. Assert dot assert that and core matchers dot not. So that's annoying, right? To have to write out assert and core matchers every time. So what you do to fix that is you say do a static import of a specific, what is this, a type or a specific method or whatever. So I'm going to say manually, statically import assert that and not. Right? So then we don't have to write assert dot and core matchers dot. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So this is how we do a plain old test. So now if we run this, if I right click on this and say run as JUnit test, it should pass, and it does, right? Because these two values are not equal to each other. But the beauty of what we want here is we want to see what the encoded password is. So we can do a system out, encoded password, rerun this test, and what we'll get is, here it is. Here's the encoded password. So you can see how this is very different from password 123. If someone were to see this in the database, they probably would have no idea, they should have no idea that equals password 123. Okay? So this is the value that we want to insert into the database. So instead of password 123, I'm going to paste in this password, this long, huge password, and I'm going to click on apply and say apply to actually, it just runs an update statement for me. Boom. So now if I do select start from users, we'll see that the password is indeed an encoded password. All right. So let's go back to, or let's run, instead of running this little unit test, let's run the entire application by right-clicking on the project, run as Spring Boot app, and let's do a test. We want to see that we can actually log in and access the protected materials, which are, I can't remember now what we've protected. We've protected permitting everything here and then protecting everything else. So the only thing that we allow is to the root, so localhost 8080, and then anything else you need to have a user role, okay, in order to access. And this is a problem because we haven't added a user role yet to the person that I just created, right? I created a user account in the users table, but I have not created an authority for this user yet. So this is, we're not done just yet. But let's go ahead and go to localhost. So there you go. Welcome to FreshVotes. And then if we try to go to /dashboard, it'll ask us to log in. So now let me log in with password 123 and say login. And what we're going to see is, okay, failed to log in. Do we have a reason why we failed to log in? Let me go and add because I was expecting to see a different error message there. Let's go ahead and do a breakpoint here. Let's restart our server in debug mode. I just want to make sure that it finds the user, which it should. And where am I? The username was Trevor@CraftyCoder. Yeah, okay. So let me go back and refresh. Let me refresh it without the question mark error. So Trevor@CraftyCoder, password 123, and say login. Okay, so something's going on here because it's not hitting our load by username method. Let me try to put a breakpoint here and see if that makes any difference. So it's not hitting this load by username. So there's actually a bug in the software here because it should be hitting the load by username method. So, all right, let's get into debug mode. What the heck could be going wrong here? So let's see. So the first thing that happens is we have a login page that just returns the login view. So this, we know this works because it returns a login page. And I believe our login page is in the resources here, right? So this is our login page that we had created. Where is this posting? So it's posting to itself. And let me think, if it posts to itself, will Spring Security know to go into the user detail service here, wherever it was? So this might be an issue with the action. Let's see. So posting to /login. And we have outlined that there is, we're allowing /login to have a permit all. Yeah. We're permitting, yeah, it shouldn't, the order of that shouldn't matter. We're permitting to the login page, which obviously that works because we can see the login page. Default success URL is dashboard. Logout is logout. Okay. We are leveraging the user details service, which is right here, right? And we're auto wiring it. So this should map to our user detail service impl because that implements user. Oh, I see the problem. Okay. Oh, this is a problem that I always run into and encounter. I keep forgetting to annotate my classes with the appropriate annotations within the Spring ecosystem. So what's happening here is the user detail service is probably null. That's my guess. So if I put a breakpoint here and restart my server, let's, I guess, save any changes I made. It should, as it's booting up, it should go in here, because this is a configuration class, so this should go in here at runtime. So it's going to come in here and user detail service. Oh, it's not null, but as you can see, it is an in-memory user detail manager, which is not, that's not what we expected. That's not what I want. And the users in here, I don't even know. Yeah, so this is a default built-in Spring Security user detail service here. This is not the one that we created. And the reason why is when it tried to auto-wire the user detail service, it couldn't find the one that we created. The one that we created is right here. Why can't it find it? Well, because it's not being managed by Spring, right? That's why it never came into this method. Spring does not know that this class exists. So we need to tell it that this class exists. How we do that is we annotate with @service, okay? Because this is a service. So we always need to remember our Spring annotations on the class level. So @service, @controller, @repository, although you don't necessarily need that one when you're anyway, we'll get there. But @controller and @service are very important to remember, because if you don't include them, Spring doesn't know that this exists, because these don't belong to the Spring, what's called the Spring container, the web container. So it doesn't know that these objects exist in the Spring ecosystem. So when you try to wire them in via auto-wired, because this is also a Spring annotation, it doesn't know that that other one exists, right? So anyway, let's restart with that @service annotation. So now that should be managed by the Spring context. That's the word I meant to say, not web container, but context. So now if we hover over user detail service, you see it looks a little different here, right? This is our user detail service, right? This is the one that we created. This has a user repo, which is over here. We have a user repository here. So this is great. That means that it has found our user detail service implementation, and it's actually using that one instead. So now if I say log in, did it hit our... Well, there was no error, so that's a good thing. Although I don't think it hit our user detail service implementation, which again is odd. So if I say password 123 and I say log in, there we go. So that was just a weird little, it didn't, for some reason it didn't get into our load by username. So now if we go forward, we'll see that it should find a user now, if all goes well in our database. Give it some time, there we go. So let's hover over this. Yes, it has found Trevor Page with a password and all that stuff. So the user is not null, so it'll return a new custom security user, which is the user that we were creating before. We'll say go, and then, well, we have, ooh, what is this? We have an error. Oh, we have like an infinite loop error. Return this .get password. Set password, user.get password. Return this .get. We probably should say return super.get password, right? Is that the problem? Username, authorities. Let's try that. I don't know if that's going to make a difference. All these bugs. Actually, we could just say return get. Let me get rid of the... So let's do password 123. I don't think we need to say super in this case. All right, so... so did it go? It didn't go in here either, did it? Let me refresh the page, log in. There we go. Now it's hitting here. So this won't, it should find a user, but the passwords don't match. And I think that's, there we go. Boom. Okay, failed to log in. So that's a good error message. We do want to see that it fails to log in because that's not the right password, right? So if I say password 123 and try to log in, this is the correct password. There we go. That's the error message I was expecting to see. Okay, so now, okay, a few things happened there. So there's another bug in my code. Let me go back and explain what just happened. So I was saying return to this .get authorities, and I think and this .get password, which I don't believe. I think that might mess things up because you want it to get the password and username and authorities from the parent object, right? So really, I said super dot whatever, but I think you can just say get authorities, get password, get username, and it should know that this comes from the parent object. So let me modify the code with that, and yeah, restart the server, and we'll leave the breakpoint in there, the one breakpoint. And then I will refresh this page because it seems like I need to refresh in order to test things properly and say log in with the incorrect password. So there we go. Now it's hitting our method right away. So I think there was an issue with refreshing there, the page. It wasn't going in here when it should have. So now what happens is it's going to try to find the user, which it does. At least it will. So it finds a user, but the passwords don't match. And this is the beauty of Spring Security. Spring Security does the password comparison for us. Okay, it does the decrypting of the password in the database, and it compares the raw password that was typed on the front end with the de-encrypted password from the database. So that is handled by Spring Security, which is really nice. So if I say play, oh, interesting, we get back to the same get password issue. So it seems like I do need to say super.get password. Because on the front end, yeah, there's no indication that anything went wrong on the front end, right? So if I get rid of my breakpoints here, and I go back and say log in, from the front end experience, nothing's happening. And it's like, what? And if I type in the correct password, still it doesn't let me log in because we're getting this long, looks like a whatchamacallit, Stack Overflow type exception. So let's see if I scroll up. Yeah, it's a Stack Overflow. So I assume it's a Stack Overflow because it doesn't know what password to get. So I guess, yeah, we need to say super.getPassword because this comes from the super object. So my apologies. You need to actually specify that. That is a Java-ism that I apparently am not privy to. Let me restart my server. All right. Refresh the login page. Click login. Boom, failed to log in. That's perfect because it's the wrong password. Type in the correct password and log in. And there we go. So there you go. So we've uncovered our bugs. So there you go. You need to say super to specifically make sure you you get the value from the super object. I assume if I don't say super and say just get password, it's just getting the password from custom security user, which doesn't have a password. So it probably just goes back into that exact same method. And then it just keeps going back and forth within itself. So essentially what I'm doing is I accidentally implemented code previously. If you get rid of this, or if you say this dot, what I'm doing is I've accidentally implemented recursive code, right? It's just recursively calling itself. That's bad. You want to say super. So there's the Java-ism that's the explanation, is if you don't say super.getPassword, then you're going to have a recursive code by accident. So be careful. That's the reason why we ran into that problem. So, but the reason why we're seeing this white label error page is because of what I was explaining before. So the person with Spring Security, you have authentication and authorization. Authentication is who are you and prove it, which is username and password, which we've done. But then there's authorization, An authorization is, okay, cool, you've proven you are who you say you are, but what access should you have to my application? Okay, what are you, a super user? Are you a admin user? Are you a read only? Are you a, like, whatever the role is that you want to apply? In this case, in our configuration, we are saying the role that this person needs to have is the user role. And right now, the user that we have logged in as doesn't have any roles at all. And the reason why they don't have any roles is because we haven't inserted one into the database. So in the database, there's an authority table that asks for or specifies the role. And the role, in this case, is called authority. So when we insert into our users table, we should also insert into the authority table with the matching row from the users table. So it requires an authority and a user ID as a foreign key. Okay, so the authority is the role itself, and then the user ID is whatever the user ID was that we've inserted previously, which in this case, the user ID was 1, so we insert 1. And the role here is role underscore, and we want it to match the user role, because that's what we are expecting. So we insert role user. Insert that into the authorities table, and now if you do a join, so if you say select star from users U, join authority A on a.userid equals u.id, we can see that we have a join here, right? We have our user Trevor Page with the password and the username, and here's the authority table, right? So this all gets joined together, and we are happy now. So if we try to go back, we might need to log out, and I don't think we can look because we. In order to log out, so you know what? The best thing to do is just restart the server, because I can't log out right now because I need to do a post in order to log out because we're leveraging the CSRF stuff. So anyway, let's go back to login. Type in the correct password now, 123, and say login. And there we go. We now see the FreshVotes dashboard. So we would not have been able to see this previously if we hadn't, if we didn't have the appropriate credentials in the database, right? You wouldn't be able to see this dashboard if you didn't have a user account with the authorization and authentication set inside of it properly from the database, right? So now we can log out. And we can try to log in again with the wrong password. It won't let you in. If you just try to access the dashboard directly, it'll redirect you to the login page. You can't see that page until you properly authenticate yourself and have the appropriate authorizations. And I can prove that the authorization matters here because I can say that I can call this admin, right? And reboot the server. So now only in the event that the person has the role of role underscore admin should they be able to see any of the pages. And our user that we have in the database is not role admin. The role that we have is role user. So if we try to log in with this same person now, go back to log in, and log in with the appropriate username and password, we're going to get the 403, forbidden. So again, authentication passes. You are who you say you are. Fantastic. But you don't have the authorization to see this page, the dashboard page, because you don't have the appropriate role. It's expecting admin, but all you have is user. So if I flip that back to user, you'll see that we're going to go back and be able to see the dashboard page, right? So if I go back to dashboard, type in the appropriate password. Now we can see the dashboard because we have the appropriate role. And another aside is you can have many roles. Okay, you can insert another role into the database. You can have role admin. Okay, so now if I go back to my select with the join, we see that the Trevor Page user has two roles: role ID 1, role ID 2, role user, and role admin. So now if I were to switch it back to say role admin in my code here, if I switch this back to admin, and reboot the server, it will allow me to log in because I have the admin role. And if I were to insert another user, like let's say, I don't know, Trevor2 or something. And let's see, this will probably be user ID 2 now, is probably what was inserted into the database. Role user, and insert that as well. And then we select star from users to see. So now we have role Trevor Page, or Trevor2 is the username with role user only. So now this just demonstrates perfectly that Trevor at Crafty Coder user with the appropriate password is allowed to log in, but the Trevor2 user with the appropriate password won't be able to see it, right? Oh, the encoded password does not match. Hold on. What did I do? What was the password? I think I set the same password, right? It was password 123. Oh, shoot, but it's not encoded. Whoops. So let me copy this encoded password and paste it here. Oh, you can't do that on a join. Hold on. Select star from users. Paste, apply, finish. Right. I tried to store a plain, this should be an encoded password when I insert it into the database. My mistake. So now if I try to do Trevor2, password 123, and log in, we get the forbidden. So Trevor2 user is not allowed to see this page because it has to be an admin role, but Trevor at Crafty Coder, sorry, I typed in the wrong password. There we go. Is allowed to see the dashboard, right? So there you go. That's a perfect demonstration of authentication and authorization right before your very eyes. But I'll change it back to user here, and you can play around with it yourself with all the different roles that you can do. And of course, you can change this to, if you wanted to have only a specific URL, like /admin only should have the role of admin, and everything else should have the role of user. This is a real world situation here, right? This is what you would see in the real world with I should say any page like this. Admin, what, ** or /*? I think, is that how you do it? Perhaps, I believe that's how you do it. So anything inside of admin at all will have to have the role of admin in order to view the page, right? That's the authority that they should have in order to see that page. So anyway, it's a very long-winded, lesson here. Apologies for that, but I hadn't posted a lesson in a while, so I wanted to make sure that you guys really got your money's worth for this tutorial. Okay. Apologies for the long-windedness. Next video should be much shorter. And now in the next video, now that we've done this, we can go forward and start to play around with the app itself, right? We can start to actually write some real-world code to accomplish whatever tasks that we want to accomplish from within the application. So maybe we can do a registration screen. That might be a good example of real-world code that we can write. Or we can start creating some UIs. Well, we can do both. So that might be a good one to do. So we can create the UI for being able to register a new user. So let's do that in the next episode. Take care of yourself. Happy learning, and bye for now.